It's my pleasure to be here to introduce our afternoon plenary speaker, Amber Case. I know that when the Symposium committee back in January saw her TED Talk, we knew that she would be perfect for this year's Symposium on Technology. Amber Case, if you guys haven't read your programs, is a cyborg anthropologist and a user experience designer from Portland, Oregon. She's been featured in Forbes, Wired, and Time, as well as other publications throughout the United States and the world. Her main focus is mobile software, augmented reality, and data visualization, and reducing the amount of time it takes for people to connect, something that I think we all can appreciate. Ms. Case found geolokey.com, is a private location sharing application, and she did this out of her own frustration with the existing social protocols of texting and wayfinding. Ms. Case has given a TED Talk on a topic similar to what she's speaking about today, technology and humans. And she was also featured in Fast Company 2010 as one of the most influential women in technology today. She has worked for several Fortune 500 companies and on major applications at Vertigo Software. For any of you guys who are interested, she's on Facebook, and you can also find her on Twitter at Case Organic. So please, let's give a nice, warm Westminster welcome for Amber Case.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to a nice place with sun. There's not much sun in Portland. All the better to be a cyborg with, I guess. Could all of you hold up your cell phones really quick? All right. Hey, nice. So the people who held them up the fastest are more cyborg than the ones who held them up more slowly. So I'm going to give you a short introduction to cyborg anthropology because there's not enough time for a long one. But basically, we're all cyborgs. You with your phones are kind of low-tech cyborgs. You're not connected all the time. If you were on a computer and you had a brain implant, you'd probably be full cyborg, but we don't want to go there because that sounds really like the Terminator. So it's not like Terminator, it's that every time you're interacting through your eyes with an interface outside yourself and storing memories in that external device, you are a cyborg. So here's a formal definition of a cyborg: an organism to which exogenous components have been added for the purpose of adapting to new ambient spaces. Basically, this means somebody in a spacesuit going into space. Also, it means a caveman saying that he's going to create this device outside of himself to extend the capability of his fist, and suddenly he can throw things and kill animals, and he doesn't have to break his bones. If you look at a saber-toothed tiger, if their tooth suddenly wears away, then it can't destroy an animal. But if a person makes a spear and throws it at an animal and it breaks, they just make a new spear. So humans are these very strange animals. This term was invented in 1960 for a paper on space travel. And really, if you think about it, humans are weird because they like to go to environments where they shouldn't be. They like to go to the bottom of the ocean, they like to go up to Mount Everest, and they like to go into space. And a lot of other animals don't like to do that. So we've had this curious relationship with our technology for a very long time. So this tool extends the capability of your physical self. In the same way that a car helps you run faster, technically, this tool can help you hit something harder. But what is a computer? A computer isn't helping you extend your physical capabilities, it's helping you extend your mental capabilities. And because of this, when you look at a hammer over time for the last 3,000 years, it hasn't really changed much. A hammer looks the same, functions the same, does the same thing as it did in the past. But what about this early computer says anything about what it does, and what about this late computer? There's nothing there that's similar at all. You look at it in your pocket, and if you were to take it back 1,000 years, no one would know what that was. Because it's an extension of your mental self, and your thoughts are invisible, the computer is shrinking over time. It's going from solid to liquid and then air. It used to be that a button was something that you physically had to press. And if you wanted to change what that button did, you'd have to go into the inside of the computer, rewire the thing, and then that button would do something else. But now, with software, you can just reprogram wherever the buttons show up on the screen, and it does something else. So the interface, which was formerly liquid, has become, or was formerly solid, has become liquid, and the next step is air. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in the future. So here's somebody extending their mental self, extending their ability to communicate with somebody across an entire cavern of space, being able to connect with someone without having to go there physically. So Maureen McHugh is a science fiction author, and she said, soon perhaps it will be impossible to tell where a human ends and a machine begins. Because if you're storing part of yourself in a computer, part of your social profile, where do you end and this machine begins? Because that machine is helping you produce your identity. So let me tell you a little bit about cyborg anthropology. First, traditional anthropology. There's a lot of anthropologists. They go to another country. They say, how fascinating these people are, how curious their cultures. I should write about it. And so they go write about it, and they take it back to wherever college they came from, and they say, look at these curious people. They're so different than us. And then we all have to learn about this culture that's very obscure. But a cyborg anthropologist decides to do the opposite. A cyborg anthropologist looks at the world around them and says, how curious these people are. Everyone has these little creatures in their pockets, and they cry, and we have to pick them up, and then we have to plug them in at night so that they have power, and then every 2 years or 1 year for some people, they kind of get really weird, and we have to throw them away and get a new one, and then sometimes we have to put protective devices on them so that we don't drop them on the floor suddenly. So that's what a cyborg anthropologist does. It looks at us and says, we're really weird, we're the culture that should be looked at, and it's right in our own backyard. So how did this all start? So cyborg anthropology came out of these Macy meetings. A bunch of anthropologists and technologists got together starting in 1941, and they said, there are these computers. Even though computers were the size of a gymnasium at that time, they said, one day, everyone will have a computer. And on that day, society will be completely changed, and we need to start now, figuring out how these machines will affect society and culture. And so they kept having these meetings for a few years, and then technology took a long time to get on everybody's desks, and these meetings were kind of lost, but this was kind of the foundations of technology. And then finally, a bunch of anthropologists came together again in 1992 and said, hey, now everyone is having the internet, and now there are computers on everyone's desks, and now it's really important to study the interaction between humans and technology. So they launched this subdiscipline in 1992. So that's the history of the subject. You can go and become a cyborg anthropologist, although there aren't that many of them right now. So let me tell you about some history. In order to find out what the future is going to hold, I always like to go back in time, maybe 30 or 40 years, to see really quirky things that people invent that we now have the capability to do. So does anyone know about this guy? This is Steve Mann, and he went to MIT in the 80s, and he was obsessed with wearing computers instead of scrunching over a computer like this. He said, why do we have to contort to a computer? The computer should be wearable by us. So he put together this giant computing device, which is about 80 pounds, and he would wear this to school every single day. And he would walk around with it. And you can barely see it, but up there he has antennas sticking out of his head from a helmet. He had to put silver gel on his hair in order to conduct a signal from the Wi-Fi access point that he created by hacking into a building next door on his campus so that he could broadcast his everyday life as he walked around the city. Anyway, it took him an entire year to convince somebody else at school to also wear a bunch of this technology, basically a year to find a friend who would do this too. And he started this thing called the Borg group. But he did a lot of interesting things along the way. He wrote this paper, if you're interested in wearable technology, it's called WearCam, the wearable camera. And what you could do with it is this. He really didn't like seeing billboards. So what he would do is he would wear this pair of glasses, and there would be a video input in one side and a processing loop around the back. And then the video would feed into his other eye, and he'd be able to look at a billboard and cancel it out and not be able to see it. And he could see text messages on it. So this is his wife sending him a text message that says, oh no, you're going the wrong way, take a left. And so he was able to do other things like that. He would go into a grocery store, and he'd be able to cancel out the products that he didn't like. So he'd be able to say, I don't like Campbell's soup, cross it out, go into the store, and only see the items that he wanted to buy. Although he looked really ridiculous when he walked into the store, and I'm sure he freaked everybody out, but you know, he had a more efficient shopping experience that way. He also liked to write as he walked down the street. So he actually wrote his college papers using this one-handed keyboard. So he'd walk down the street like typing and seeing it in his heads-up display attached to his glasses, and he'd be able to write his entire term papers that way while going for a walk in the park instead of sitting there in front of a computer. Here's an example of him canceling out a billboard and putting his own paper on it that he was researching. Also, he was able to leave notes and locations. So his wife left him a note at this supermarket in 1995 that said, Steve, remember to pick up the 2% milk. So when he got to the store, he couldn't forget it. So no more sticky notes or anything like that. So this was a really early person who liked computers and ridiculous looking. But over time, he said, my computer will go from 80 pounds to this kind of interesting looking glasses system on the right side. So it went from 80 pounds to maybe 5 or 6 ounces, and had all this processing capability. And he said one day, the power to do this will be in everyone's pockets, and it won't be a big deal. And of course, no one believed him. And today, this is with his daughter. You can see his glasses look almost identical to regular glasses. They're not too much different. So let's talk about present day. So one of the curious things is you have all these computers, and you're carrying around these kind of Mary Poppins devices. You can put all sorts of information into them, and they don't get any heavier. So you can store tons and tons of papers in them, and nothing happens. So a company tried to figure out, what if we took 8 years of someone's photos and printed them out into physical space? What would they look like? What are people carrying around in the computers? So they printed them out, and it looked like this. Tiny, tons and tons of pictures, giant pile, probably about 300 pounds of information in there. And so, when your hard drive crashes, you're probably losing this, and you're carrying around with you every day, except you can't see it. So we have these kind of magical pieces of technology that we're dealing with every day. And the other thing is, when you start storing all of your memories in a computer, you no longer just have memories in your brain, you have these types of hyperlinked memories, where you're not just remembering that memory, you're remembering the keyword that you used to get to that memory. So if you're looking in your email, what is the keyword that I had to trigger that conversation with that person? And you have to dig through it outside yourself. So because of that, we're all becoming these kind of paleontologists, digging through the history of our own lives that we've stored online, and using the keyword search to dig through our email accounts to try and find those memories that we've stored outside ourselves. So we're becoming very integrated with this technology. The other thing is, if you go to a party and you start checking something else, you end up getting interrupted by somebody who's in this time and space, and then you're in this time and space, and it kind of bleeds together. So there's all sorts of social punctuation going on in your everyday life. And then the other thing that's going on is that you kind of have a simultaneous time, which is, have you ever opened up a browser and then had a bunch of different interesting things that you're trying to browse on, like Facebook and this interesting article and this piece of news, and suddenly your brain says, I want to read all these things at once, and it doesn't work. And then there's somebody trying to text you, and then you're trying to talk to somebody in real life, and there's this simultaneous time going on. It's very difficult for your brain. And if all of that comes together, you just go into a panic, and there's nothing you can do, because you can't really scale as a human. That's actually my inbox. I'm getting a lot better, but not quite yet. So these are some of the discontents. There's a story of a guy who had an old phone, and I think it was in Colombia, and he got on a bus with one of these phones like a few years ago, and everyone in the bus laughed at him, and he had to hide the fact that he had this old phone. The thing is, if you keep a piece of technology for too long, it turns against you, which is really bad. It makes you look uncool. So you have to keep evolving your external self. I mean, if this is an extension of your brain, you're like buying a new brain at the store every day. You're like, brain 2.0, it's faster, it's better, it's the best. And then you have to keep getting the upgrades for it. The other thing is, when the phone first came out, when the telephone first came out, you could go into a room and talk on the phone for a few hours. And now you can't. Now the phone is untethered from its leash, and you can run around outside with it in your pocket. And so now everybody has to have temporarily negotiated private space. Like if you see somebody walking a dog, or you get a call in the library and you have to run outside and make sure you have enough space between you and somebody else in order to make a call. This guy, you can see the spacing. Everybody on a phone has some space between each other. It's like cigarettes, like cell phones and the new cigarettes. You have to run outside, and you can't smoke them inside, and then you have to keep 300 feet away from a building, or else people can hear your conversation. So this is one proposed solution to that. This is actually a real working model. This guy, you can put this over your head, but then you can also push it up and it'll slide into your backpack. So you can walk around, and whenever you need to take a phone call, whoop, and then so this guy walked around in New York with this cell phone booth, and he'd go up to a deli counter and make an order. And then, oh, sorry, I have to take a call, whip out his phone, and then whip out the privacy booth. And then the woman at the counter would be like, wait, what are you, you can't do this. And he did that continuously for a while. And I think you can buy one of these. I'm sure they're pretty expensive, though. But the other thing is, every time you're upgrading one of your devices, you have to leave one of these behind. So it's kind of like a tree, right? A tree every season loses all its leaves in order to make room for new ones. But as humans, every season we lose all of our electronics and make room for new electronics. And that's just how it is. And when you get rid of your electronics, it allows new electronics to blossom and grow, just like when trees lose their leaves. Except it doesn't end up doing very great things for the world. So see the e-waste session that was before this one about trying to recycle these external brains that we all have. As a human, we only need one brain our entire lives, but now with technology, we need, I don't know, probably 30 or 40 of these you'll go through. And that's just that. It's not even the televisions or the computers. So this is a concept called ambient intimacy. It was invented by Lisa Reichelt. And what she talked about is that it's not that you're always connected with everybody, but that at any point, you always have the ability to be connected with someone. And so if you were to take all of those people that you had the ability to connect to right now and kind of print them out, you'd have this many people in your pocket that, on Facebook, on Twitter, on email, that you're able to connect with. And there was this one guy, and he was in Japan, far away from his family, and he got a text message that said that his sister died. And he was completely away from everything and just stuck in an unfamiliar territory. And so he sent out a message to Facebook, and he said, my sister just died. It's a very distinguished, serious person that never shared his personal life. And suddenly everyone just kind of gave him this virtual hug. They're like, it's okay, I understand, and things like that. And he kind of felt like he was in this crowd of people that he knew instead of a crowd of people that he didn't know anymore. So what this technology does is kind of stretches space-time out in some places and kind of compresses it in others so that you can feel very close to a bunch of people while you're far away from them. But the opposite happens. I think that a lot of people say, oh, technology is getting rid of our ability to be human. I think it's the exact opposite, because if you've ever been in a bad traffic jam, you're technically in a crowd like this, but you don't know anyone, and you can't talk to anybody. And so modern society has kind of given us these places where we're put on pause. If you're standing in line at the DMV, you're put on pause. If you're standing in line at a grocery store. And really, there's nothing that you can be contributing to society or feel good about yourself in a traffic jam. But if you have a phone and you put it on speakerphone and you start talking to somebody, suddenly you're connected to somebody, and suddenly you're not on pause anymore. So the technology actually brings you closer to somebody else in this very kind of cold isolation experience. So now becoming a cyborg, since you guys already are, but everyone in the future, I guess, will be, unless you decide not to be. So now babies are having this second self before they're born. I can't imagine how embarrassing it's going to be. I mean, think about baby pictures. If you have embarrassing baby pictures, there's going to be all of the tweets that your parents created for you, like anybody born past this date, a whole social media profile to look up, and maybe you can cancel it out or something, or have an opt-out feature or something like that. But this kid's going to grow up with this entire social history of all these people interacting with him when he's little. He has 4,200 followers already. He can't even speak for himself. So this is your second self, whatever you end up creating it as, whatever social network that you create it on. And just like when you wake up in the morning, you try and wash your hair and look presentable, now you have another self to take care of. You have to make sure you upload the correct pictures, and make sure you talk about things in the right way, and make sure you comment on somebody's social profile. And it becomes this other second self that you can maintain, and it speaks for you when you're not even there. People are interacting with probably most of your second selves right now, and you're not even there. And you can't even see who's interacting with them. But when you go and check Facebook, you'll see that you'll get a comment on the wall. But it's just a placeholder for your real self. So reality is not always fun, and it's not always fast. So now there become these very exciting ways to interact with reality, where suddenly you have points, and suddenly you have 5 stars, and there's this whole layer on reality that helps to make it fun again. But really, when I started studying people who were addicted to Farmville, I realized that in real life, sometimes it's hard to complete a goal. Say, you go through college, it takes 4 or 5 years, or you want to get a promotion at work. And maybe you don't have a giant yard, so you can't farm. And farming is actually back-breaking work, and it really sucks. And there's a bunch of sun in your face the whole time, and you're arched over trying to harvest something. But if you go online, in Farmville, everything you click on is exciting. Like, you get 500 points for this, and you get 20 points for that, and there's all your friends there. And so it's actually better because you can achieve things faster in this virtual space than you could in reality. So people start to get addicted, and then they get stuck into this kind of web of social obligations where they're obligated to now go to that person's farm because that cow could die, and they're attached to it. People are showing up on talk shows. There's this woman who showed up on a talk show about Farmville addiction, and the talk show host said, well, how are your cows doing right now? And she said, I had someone else take care of my cows while I was on this talk show, but we can't go over 1 hour because the cows will die, and I have to get back to Farmville. And she was really intent on it. So really, all this stuff is kind of a database game. If you've ever used a spreadsheet before, you open up the spreadsheet, and there's like a bunch of different rows and cells, and it says, this cell has changed, or you input different rows. Well, when you open up Facebook, it's just a big spreadsheet, and your friend is like in cell A2, and your friend changed their status. It's just a giant database game. And so spreadsheets have never been, this fun or exciting. So suddenly, you're playing life as a game, right? You have a level up. Like, I got one more friend. I got one more follower. There was a thumbs up on this post. It's fantastic. And all of these things are tied into social grooming. You can hug somebody, but you can also give them a thumbs up on Facebook. And because their brain is kind of tied into this reflex on Facebook, you can feel the excitement as if someone were to give you a hug as well. So you're getting virtually hugged, and it goes to your head, right? It literally goes to your brain, and you feel it. So this is kind of the social grooming in the virtual space. Your friend goes abroad, you don't see her, but you can interact with her in a similar way that you would in real life, or some semblance of it. So all of these have these psychological and physiological effects. I asked somebody, how do you get, she had a 10-year-old daughter. I said, is your daughter on Facebook? And she said, well, she was too afraid to go to Facebook, so she created a profile of the family dog and acted as the family dog and would bark on everyone's Facebook walls, like in the family. So just like starts going all over the place as this dog. And then one day, nobody comments on the, arf, arf, for the 1000th time, status update. She says, why didn't anyone comment on it? She said, it's okay. Sometimes people don't comment on things online. And it was this just giant upsetting moment for this 10-year-old, like to know that didn't happen all the time. So those are the type of learning experiences that people are going to have to learn in the future. Or watching a celebrity who's 12 years old on YouTube not be a celebrity in 6 months and have to deal with the craziness of being a short-term celebrity online. So has anyone used these Tamagotchis? I don't know if that's a yes or no. There's a lot of mumbling. Well, okay. Whoa. So these Tamagotchis, right? They make noise, and the teacher gets mad, and then they take them away, and then sometimes the sound is still on, and then you're worried because the Tamagotchi might die overnight and things like that. So these are just these kind of training wheels, right? Because now what you have is this. It's kind of the same size and shape as the Tamagotchi, except you have real friends in there instead of virtual friends, and there's more than one. And you have to feed them, or the relationship goes away, and you have to maintain them, and if the teacher takes your phone away, then suddenly you don't have that capability. So each of these creatures have become real, and these have become kind of the training wheels to get you into what you're interacting with. So these used to be the analog backyards. You know, you would figure out the extent of your capability on, you would be able to climb a tree and figure it out. But now people are growing up with things like Club Penguin. If you have any younger brothers or sisters that are obsessed with Club Penguin, and they're able to interact with people all over the world, but it's a whole mental game. So what I'm worried about is that people are not connecting the mental and the physical selves. And so now they have these kind of summer camps that have you climb trees so that you can interact physically with things again. So what about the future? So there's this idea called calm technology, and it's kind of a curious concept. It's from the 1970s, from a guy at Palo Alto Research Center. You might know them because they invented the Xerox printer machine, the really annoying printers with a big blue or a big green button on them that says print, which is the only button that anyone uses. So this calm technology is the idea that the best technology gets out of the way and lets you live your life. And Douglas Adams has this great quote. He said, "What's a nerd? A nerd is somebody who uses a phone to call other people up to talk about telephones, or uses a computer to talk about computers." But the majority of people don't want to just fiddle around with technology. So Mark Weiser talked about calm technology. We talked about improved interfaces. So if you're designing something and you say, "Oh, this is an iPad surface, I'll make something that looks like a page turning." The minute you try to use it with your finger and then the page doesn't go over, in real life you always know where the page is and you can physically interact with it. So a better one is just to have it flip from the middle. If you were able to print this interface out, it'd look like a giant Rolodex and would be impossible in real life, but it's really efficient on the iPad. So sometimes people are saying, okay, let's just make it look like the old thing, but really it needs to take advantage of the new interface. So that's kind of a new, better interface, kind of a superhuman interface that makes you feel relaxed with the technology and doesn't overpower you. So another thing, being able to leave notes and locations. Like say you always forget your grocery list, you could just leave your grocery list at the store and then get it texted to you when you get there. So I'm trying to make some of this technology exist right now. So this one, I left my friend a note in the river that said, "Watch out for the giant sea creatures." And he went to the river and he got the message that there are giant sea creatures. And that was our test. So it worked out fine. Another thing that we did is we wanted to make a real life game of Pac-Man around the city streets. So that was actually copyrighted. So we made a game where you were on a red and blue team and you acted like Pac-Man and fought against each other, and we called it Map Attack. And here's the game board. We played this one at Stanford University. So the reason that the red team won is because 2 kids took their parents' phone and ran the entire campus and got all the points before anybody else got to, and they totally cheated. But you can't say to like a 6-year-old, you totally cheated, because it doesn't work on them. So each of these little dots is a point, and it's a virtual point. You can only see it on your phone, and so you have to like run around and get the point, and it goes ding, you got a point, ding, you got 50 points, ding, you got 20 points, and then like the blue team is in the lead, and then you end up fighting over campus. So this was kind of a fun game to make. But during that time, we realized that we all felt like we were kids again, because we weren't playing a game inside. We were actually the players in our own real-time strategy game, and it felt great. And we ended up running like 5 or 10 miles each, but we didn't notice that we had run because we were just out of breath and trying to get these virtual points that no one could see. And everyone would just watch us running down the street, being very confused as to what we were doing. So in the future, if done well, your phone will become a remote control for reality. So you'd be, well, I want to do this, and you can click and something happens, or it'll send you a location-based message based on what you're supposed to be doing. So if I go to San Francisco, it'll say, hey, you're staying at this person's house, here's the address, then I'll get on the bus, and it'll tell me the stop to get off on, so I can just go to sleep and then get a ding, get off on the stop, and then it'll give me the instructions to the person's house. Naturally, I would be, emailing or being a persistent paleontologist, trying to dig through all of those emails that had been sent and then try to figure out the address. So all of it's just kind of taking your life and making it a little bit easier to deal with, because now there's too much information. So good technology will do that if it's designed well. So the problem is with a lot of technology that's existed so far is that it's been badly designed and has been possible to make good technology. So for a long time, people have said, I'm not good at computers, I'm horrible at computers, when in reality, computers have been bad at humans, and it's computers' fault, and the design of computers' faults. So if you do end up making technology, be sure to design it well, which is really hard to do. Apple's trying to do a good job at that. And then the best technology should just get out of the way and connect you to somebody, instead of making you fiddle with something for 3 hours. So in the future, this will not be there. But these guys are playing the real-life Pac-Man game, and they just won, so they're really exciting. But they're using computers right now, and you can't tell. So that will be the future, hopefully, where you can't even tell that anyone's using a computer. So thank you very much.
If anyone has any questions, please come down to the front, present them to Amber.
Yeah, I can barely see all you guys out there, so I'm going to step up here a little bit. You're going to ask about the singularity, right? Yes. All right.
My name is Will Meikle. I am a freshman here and an engineering major. And I was wondering, in your own words, will you define singularity?
Okay, sounds good. So the first question I always get is define singularity. And so it's a curious thing. The singularity is at the point in time in which everything converges and everyone's the same person. But I think it's happened a few times already. And I think Michael Jackson's death was a singularity, because everyone on Earth knew that Michael Jackson died at the same time, right? Everyone, I mean, can you remember the time that you heard that Michael Jackson died, and then you could walk down the street? It was like everyone had the same weather, you know? Oh, look outside, Michael Jackson has died, and there's Michael Jackson music playing. And then the earthquake in Haiti, everyone knew about the earthquake in Haiti at the same time. Probably September 11th might have been the first one where everyone knew at that point in time that it was going on. And I think the thing about singularities is that they might happen more and more often about lesser and lesser important things versus really, really important things. But they're not there all the time. So when people say, we're all going to be mind melded together, it's more like, we'll all have the capability to know something of importance all at the same time in the world. And so they're kind of intermittent. You do your own thing, then everyone's in the same mindset, and then you go back to doing your own thing. So I think that's a singularity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I'm Chris Given, a junior here, majoring in philosophy. And I noticed that when you talked about the climbing trees, you seemed to empathize with this goal of sort of bringing kids back outside and making sure we were in touch with our actual surroundings in a way rather than just the virtual ones. But then when you talked about the idea of, say, your phone as a remote control for reality, the picture also seemed to convey this sense that we were detached from our surroundings again at that point. And at that point, I want to know, is that an okay thing to do? Is it okay for us to remove ourselves purposefully from this goal of, say, climbing trees or just noticing what's going by the bus window as we ride around? And as our technology becomes invisible to us, as it becomes that remote control and essential, is it not entirely dangerous, but hard to control because we don't know it's there. We don't notice it anymore.
Yeah, that's a good point. So for instance, if you get driving directions and the route actually leads you into a bridge that's broken and you drive off the bridge because you're totally just used to driving directions and your GPS in your car, I mean, there's been issues with that where people will go to a private property and Google refuses to fix that private property on maps, and everyone thinks it's Disneyland or something, so like 500 cars show up to this guy's house. And they're like, we followed Google Maps. And he says, do you see the giant private sign on the outside? And they're like, well, we just thought it was a theme park in Disneyland. No, this is this guy's house. So yeah, I think that there's going to be a bunch of people who are completely dependent on it, which one could say, I'm trying to be neutral, but could be very bad. And there's also really good benefits. And I think that when any technology comes in, technology itself is neutral, and then it depends on how people use it. So there's going to be an equal amount of just like horrible things that happen and really good things to counterbalance it. And it is a little bit hard to change. I know that a lot of people who are really into the web and build technology, they will take a break for 2 weeks every year and not touch a bit of it and go completely offline. No email, nothing. They'll even send all the email they get that time to a deletion box just to kind of rid themselves of it. And they'll read books and they'll hang out outside. And then afterwards, their brain feels okay again. I mean, I don't know if you guys experienced this, but if you've been on the computer for like 8 hours and you've done something random that's not very productive, doesn't your brain kind of feel like it's eaten a bunch of junk food? Like, doesn't it just feel kind of gross? I mean, I do that every once in a while. But I think that we've evolved with the ability to, you eat and your stomach knows you're full, right? You say, oh, I can't possibly eat anymore. But when you're online, your brain doesn't say, your brain's full, stop going on the internet. You're like, oh, that link is really cool, and I'm gonna click on that one, and then I'm gonna click on that one, and your brain doesn't have that reaction. So either we learn to use it in moderation, or we get really addictive side effects for part of the population. It might be the same part of the population that's going to be watching television for 8 hours every day, too. So thanks for the question.
All right, thank you.
Hi, I'm Philip Taylor. I'm an MIS major, sophomore. And I was wondering, what is your stance on BCI, brain-computer interface, and whether or not that technology has to be separate for it to be beneficial, or does it have to be, can it be beneficial while still connected to the neurons in our brain?
Great. So the question is about brain-computer interfaces. So the most extreme would be you get a computer inside your brain, attaching directly to your brain. The least invasive would be you get little EEG nodes that allow you to control a computer with your mind. I really like the EEG, the non-invasive ones, because think about this. You already have to go out and debug your stuff and get it fixed and go to the repair shop. If you had something embedded in your brain, you could get a virus in your brain, and then it would crash, and then you'd be sitting there in class, and then you'd have to go to the Apple store to get surgery in the back of the store by a licensed technician, and he would have to fix that thing in your brain, and then sometimes it would reject. And then if you're wealthy, you get the best service, and if you're poor, then you just get something that shocks you every 15 minutes because you haven't upgraded it, right? So that's why I'm against invasive brain-computer interfaces. My favorite alternative, which I've tried, is the EEG, where you have the little diodes on your head, and it doesn't do anything. It doesn't feel anything weird. It's just like a little headset that makes you look a little bit wacky. And you can use it to focus your thoughts to control a mouse on a screen or to like levitate something in a Star Wars scene. They actually have this as a real game. I like that a lot. And I think what's going to happen is, right now maybe a bunch of us can't focus because we've downloaded too much of the internet into our brains and we can't do much. But I think if any of us has kids and they're interacting with the web through their brain, they'll be able to focus really well. So they'll be like, hey, Dad or Mom, play a game with me. And we'll be like, oh, no, I can't focus well enough. And so there'll be this kind of switch where, one generation can focus and the other one can't. Because what serves us well in this world and when everybody goes out and gets jobs is the ability not to remember everything, but to remember where it was, which lends well to just kind of a liquid brain. But yeah, I don't like invasive brain-computer interfaces. If you make them easy to remove, or make it so you can download the software internally to make a hardware upgrade, or else people are going to be painful. They'll have a painful experience, I think.
Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Billy. I was a presenter today on e-waste, actually. I think a lot about, like what you said, this kind of digital hug or virtual hug. Is there any research about kind of the physiology behind that, or the kind of neuroscience behind that, like CT scans, real hug versus virtual hug? Like, how's that break out?
Yeah, there have been, I think, some New York Times articles that were talking about the researchers that were doing work in that field, and I need to really dig into that because it's becoming a larger and larger question as, is this stuff really tied? If you think about an analogy, when you're learning to drive a car, you kind of have to map your brain onto the car. And when you're really good at driving, you just react, and the car is part of you. It's no longer separate from you. When you get in the car, you become the car. So when you go online and you're good at being online, or you're good at being on Facebook, your brain kind of just maps to that. But that's more of an analogy from philosophers used to better describe what's going on. And I think if there isn't a lot of research being done in the area, there should, because it's probably a really important subject, especially when dealing with, you could have a simulation where somebody who's very depressed could suddenly have a bunch of upvotes on Facebook and suddenly get out of their depression. You could run a sim. They have this in Japan. They have virtual boyfriends and girlfriends that you can text to so that you can feel comfortable in reality. Somebody who's just very objective that says, hey, you look great today, or hey, I really like your haircut. I mean, they've never seen you before. They're a computer program just trying to help you out and kind of balance your brain. So I know that they exist, but I don't know what studies have been done on them.
Hi, my name's Josh. The question I had is, I think also through this morning session that we had in here, we heard technology used as something that's going to be beneficial, and it really is going to make a difference in civilization and how we live our lives. And I think you represented that a little bit as well, where it's something good and it's an advantage. Isn't it also likely that the more technology becomes a part of us and the more we use it, it'll breed a sort of apathy where we can just go for that instant gratification, the instant boyfriend, the farm bill as opposed to a real farm, or even to more serious issues where instead of dealing with the problems in our society ourselves, we're just more likely to spend our days on World of Warcraft?
Yeah, that's a good question. In some ways, so I always think that there's kind of different sections of people. There's always some people who are like, okay, here's a computer. I'm going to build a computer, or I'm going to build a piece of software. And then there's a bunch of people who say, I just want to click on this celebrity thing, which is fine, right? It's just kind of a spectrum of the population. I think, though, that the internet makes it even easier to kind of have fast food information, which is like, celebrity information is probably like the double cheeseburger of the web. Like, it's really low resolution, it's kind of crappy, but man, it tastes really good and you can get addicted to it. So I think that people will figure that out and they'll say, okay, we want to fix this problem. So let's make an interface that makes it, that reduces the friction to achieving that goal. So say we want to save the rainforest. So they make an interface that turns people into, people who save the rainforest in a fun way. Or I guess one of the things I proposed is, instead of plain Farmville, you attach it to remote machines who are actually farming, and then everyone actually clicks on the web and they're farming in real life somewhere else. And so suddenly you are actually, you harvested like 500 grapes, and then, you logged off and somebody else took it up. And all these machines on the other side of the world who's harvesting all of the crops or like helping people out, will end up moving all the time. And I don't know what that would do for workers or workers' rights or anything like that, or if they would have to maintain these machines. But it's kind of a thing of, what are we doing right now? Like, the internet is both a playground and a factory. Like, you're making all these clicks that do something, but they're not really doing anything really useful. So if you could change those and kind of harness them into doing something in real life, like making a vaccine for somebody in a lab, and you think you're playing a game of like, online kitten web video watching, and you actually are saving somebody's life, but you don't know it, that would be kind of cool. The opposite way, you could be killing somebody remotely, but you don't know that either. So yeah, that's a good science fiction thing that would probably happen at some point, probably in the next year or two. So thanks for the question.
Thank you.
I'm Tyler. I'm a freshman. You bring up about the MIT student and how he was able to kind of distort his perception of reality. Like, I don't want to see billboards, so I will instead see my Post-it note. So do you think that this kind of distortion of our perception of what is real has like a normative connotation? You bring it up like it's kind of cool, like he doesn't have to see these annoying billboards anymore.
Yeah.
But do you think there's like a normative connotation, like we ought to or ought not to distort our perceptions?
That's a good question. In a way, the billboards are already distorting your reality, right? Just being in a city is a complete distortion of nature. It's buildings and billboards and signs and a bunch of brands. And so what he was trying to do, I mean, he invented his own Walkman player when he was little because he was just kind of upset in living in modern society because he was forced to deal with all the stuff that he didn't need to. So he'd be able to, put on a set of headphones and listen to an audio tape, which no one had done at that time. So he looked really crazy. But I think people are already doing that online. You only read the sites you want to read. You're not reading this whole collection. People already do that with newspapers. Some people read one type of newspaper. Some read the articles in another type of newspaper. And I think no one has really a normal or understanding of reality. They're always in groups. He just didn't want, kind of pressuring, annoying advertising in real life. So he decided to get rid of that so he could have his own thoughts. And he has a lot of issues like that. He created this term called surveillance, which is the opposite of surveillance, where surveillance is like those video cameras from above. And he said, with my camera, I can take pictures of people instead of people taking pictures of me. And now we all have cell phones, so we can do it. But that was kind of where that came from, where if you're in a protest, you can suddenly take pictures of somebody, spraying pepper spray you or something, and then upload them to the internet immediately and geotag them, which is what I talked about this morning. But yeah, no matter what, people are going to be in their own groups. And he just found a way to filter out the effect of other people's groups on him, I guess.
Thank you.
Hi, it's TK from Cambodia. I'm a freshman, and I went to UWC school in Canada. So I apologize for what I'm gonna say, but it's just that from what I can see from your presentation is that it's too positive again. It's that, technology is good. Cyber anthropology is good. You study about the technology affect your human life. It's just that one is that I see your thing about reality is kind of true to some extension, but like playing the farm wheels online. Well, sure, it's fun and stuff, but it doesn't improve your ability to think too much. It's just like, okay, one click and then you find something and stuff. I remember what I studied in my basic writing class about the favorite teacher. The guy named Thomas something. He said that internet can make you smart, but it doesn't make you smarter. It's like you forgot about your fundamental. And also a couple more points that I want to point out is that the internet can make you become something bad as well. It's not just always good, like the kids always go and search on some inappropriate site, and they learn something bad from the internet. Cyberbullying, for example. Some other stuff is that the upgrade of technology could be good, but to some extent it's not really good. Like say you have the iPad and then the versus the iPad 2. Like of course everyone would want to go for the latest technology, but then think about the iPad 1. You wasted your money, the resources, and it's not really sustainability. It's just another part of the business. Like they want more profit. Thank you.
Thanks. So you brought up a lot of points. We should probably address some of these in the breakout session. Yes, technology can be good or bad. It can make it smarter and not smarter. It just depends on how you use it. So some people can do a great job with it. Some people can just sit there and click. As a summation of what you said, maybe we can talk about that a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, really, it's just if you use it one way, cool things can happen. If you use it another way, horrible things can happen. And it's with, same with books. When the books came out and when the telephone came out, people said, oh no, these people are just going to stick their head in a book and never be social anymore. Or when the phone came out, they said, you're just going to sit in a room for the rest of your life and never interact. And that ended up not happening. It just became something. So there's always going to be people who use it badly and some people who use it well. And it's a new product, so it's artificially made. It's always going to kind of destroy one system and create another. So I think it's equal no matter what happens in terms of development. So, oh, great.
Hello, I'm Brian. I'm a junior here, majoring in political science and transnational studies. I'm wondering right now, the current user interfaces are it's probably a large type between cell phones and laptops. You said the goal of technology at this point should be to become even more invisible. Where do you think the user interface are going to go from here? Since now it's typing on a keyboard or a large or small keyboard. Where's it going to go from here?
So they've set up these smart houses for about $20 million in R&D. So my friend and I said, let's make a cheap smart house. So we took these 20-year-old modules called X10 controllers, and we took an old network called IRC, and we took phones with GPS, and we put a virtual circle around our house. And we said, when the phone is detected that it goes into the circle, trigger the lights to turn on, and when the phone leaves the circle, turn the lights off. So we set it up once, and there's no interface. The interface is getting home, and then the off button is leaving the house. It's completely invisible once you set it up. So that sort of thing is, we never come home to a house that's dark, and we never have to remember to turn off the lights. And if you want to, and something goes wrong, you can either just not track with your phone and turn the off button, or you can turn off the lights manually. But for 99% of the cases, it's just a nice convenience, you know. But in that case, it's just smooth. You don't have to worry about it. It's that calm technology. Now, there could be a lot of issues with that, but all the issues we found is, you know, if you want to sneak in because you're making a surprise party and you don't want them to know that the lights are turning on, just press the off button on your phone. But we also have, you know, other things of, you know, there's a motion detector. So if somebody tries to rob the house, it'll automatically take a picture of them and send it as a picture message to our phones. And then we can go and with a text message have the house talk to the intruder and say, hey, what are you doing? So, you know, it's kind of funny things that you can do. Those are, you know, more positive, but having that, you know, kind of stitching together reality like that's really fun. Or if I'm going to be late to a meeting, automatically, if it notices I'm not at work before 9 a.m., that I'm not in the circle defined as work, automatically text message my boss saying I'll be late, estimate how far I am from the office, and send him a traffic report of like, I'll actually be there in 7 minutes according to traffic, and then my location so he can actually see me arrive. Like things like that. Otherwise, I'd have to be texting him in the car the whole way, I'm sorry, I'm gonna be late for work. You know, if it does it automatically, you know, you're less likely to run into a truck. So that could be life-saving too. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Amber Case, thank you very much.